Let's just start with a basic definitional question. When you hear critical race theory over and over again, what should people understand? How do you define CRT?
So I first want to just make a distinction between CRT, which is a theoretical framework that I learned in graduate school and read about in graduate school, versus teaching about race and racism in American history critically. So critical race theory is a framework. It's a theoretical framework that was developed in the 1980s by legal scholars to help us understand how it is that structural and racial disparities endure in our society and how that is actually engendered in some of our laws and policies. And so the idea was to get us to think systemically, as opposed to just thinking that racism manifests by individuals just mistreating each other. That there are actual structures in our society that create these different kinds of racial gaps and racial disparities economically, in terms of housing, in terms of education. And so that's what they do, is that they actually show us how how laws that are supposed to be neutral actually can promulgate or support racial disparities. That's a theoretical framework. I think what we're talking about today, though, is some contestation and conflict over how you teach about race, racial hierarchies, critically, racism in schools and society. And so the two are being conflated.
And so when you hear people talking repeatedly about critical race theory, what is your thought?
Well, I hear people talking about critical race theory. I see that as a straw man for many communities, politicians particularly, trying to shape the knowledge base in what we teach students. I think that there is some fear about raising consciousness about structural inequality, about structural racism, because it does implicate many of our practices in our society. It indicates what we would have to do differently in government. And some of that is ideological in terms of there's a lot of resistance to how we do things to be fairer and more just in our society. So, there are a number of, I read a really good article just yesterday in the New Yorker about the origins of this conflict and who's behind it. And it's a concerted effort by many on the right to mitigate the extent to which we really augment and increase